Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. This past week I actually did it on Wednesday, so the questions are from Wednesday's Sunday question and answer video. There's a sleet storm happening outside. I put up a video yesterday on ice storm prep. It's actually supposed to warm up in the afternoon and rain for a while, so hopefully a lot of it's going to get erased and not cause any significant damage. But right now you can probably hear it's sleeting like crazy. It's kind of noisy out here on the porch. What else? I may not have a Sunday question and answer video this next Sunday. My son and I we try to do an epic trip every year, and we didn't do one in last calendar year, but we did one December 2020. We went out west and I think went to 5 national parks on that trip. But if you follow me over on Instagram on the HortTube, there'll be photos from this next one. We're going to 3 national parks and several national monuments, and have a seaplane lined up, and should be pretty epic. But if you follow me over on Instagram, you can see photos of that. So I don't know if next Sunday I'll have a question and answer video or not. If not, the questions that you ask below this video I'll answer 2 weeks from now. What else? I put up a couple videos this week of some winter interest plants in the landscape. And there's actually some things, even in a sleet storm this morning, there's some things out there that, still look great. So thanks for following along with all of those videos. Let's get to some questions from this past Wednesday. The first one was a poison ivy question. I had seen it a couple times. I wasn't ignoring the question. It's just I've answered these questions about how to remove, there's no difference between the question about removing poison ivy than there is ligustrum or ivy or mondo grass or any other invasive thing that is, taking over your space, other than the fact that poison ivy, obviously, you can have a reaction to it that's a little different than those other plants. But there's really no good answer to these things. Either you either spray them or you chop them out or pull them. And so for me, I've been tenacious in this garden with all of the noxious weeds that were here, just staying on top of them, staying on top of them, staying on top of them. So I take my shovel around and I chop just to the side and under the weed, so that I chop the roots, and then I just let them lie, because they're, they just die in place and compost in place, and just keep walking. There was another question about woody shrubs coming up through the middle of their shrubs, and so I have that problem too. I have a lot of Japanese ligustrum that try to germinate inside of my shrubs, and you can't see them, so they've grown 1.5 feet by this time of year, last spring and summer. This is a great time of year to pull those out. Your shrubs, even your evergreen shrubs, tend to be a little bit thinner. You don't have to worry about reaching in there as much, because the snakes are, if you have snakes, they're not going to be a problem. So fishing around in your shrubs for noxious weeds, this is probably the best time of year to be cleaning those out. But that poison ivy question, you basically have to put on a bubble suit and pull it, and make sure that you dispose of everything. That oil can stay on gloves. You can pull it, put those gloves on a shelf somewhere, come back, put those gloves on months later, touch your face, and you'll get it. So keep that in mind, that those oils stay on everything. So if you do get them on your clothes, for me, I just get, like I say, I like the chopping method. I just get, take my shovel, chop underneath it, and keep walking. Again, if you want to spray it, make sure you're not spraying it where it's way up on the trees, or you could damage the trees. You do need to get in there and cut it off the bottom of the trees. There's no great answer for it other than getting out there, getting started on it, and just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And here I am 24 months or so into this project, and I have very few of those noxious weeds at this point. But this started off as 100% just things that will drive you crazy like that. That you don't get a reaction from them like poison ivy, but they are spreading obnoxious things. Okay, somebody asked me about their containers. They have them on their porch steps and wondered how vulnerable they were to freezing. I have mine out there on the driveway, all pot to pot, closer together than that. It just totally depends on what's in the pots. That's the only answer to the question, is what's in the pots. Is if they're things that are a couple a couple zones hardier than your area, then they'll probably be fine regardless of how they're spaced or whether they're covered or not. But if there's things that are barely hardy in your area, if that pot freezes solid for 2 or 3 straight days, they could be damaged regardless of how you have them, arranged in the landscape. So keep that in mind. It's as much to do with how hardy that plant is as it is, how they're spaced or how they're covered or, that kind of thing. If something that's vulnerable, I'd get it in the house, let it get it thawed out. If it's, but again, if it's, something like a boxwood that's zone 5 hardy and I'm in zone 7, if it stays frozen for 36 hours, it's not going to hurt it out there. Okay, somebody asked me about gardening books that I like. I actually did a video on this a few years ago at my garden center. I remember this was at my garden center because I had a lot of my books there. My books in this business have always been more technical guides, like Durr's Woody Plant Manual or his propagation manual or, Dr. Michael Durr. You guys saw a video that I did with the terrible audio in Athens a couple months ago now. And Gordon, that Half Acres Landscape Plants to the Southeast is one that I used a lot. But I have never, this is probably bad, probably shouldn't even say this, I've probably never fully read a gardening book, like somebody sat down and wrote a book about gardening in my life. And I'm actually a reader. I'm not a non-reader. It's just I've been doing this my whole life, so it just hasn't been, reading gardening books hasn't been my, it's not an escape from gardening, you know what I mean? For me, entertainment needs to be an escape from this thing that is my business in my life. So I've never read one completely through. And I've got friends that have written gardening books. I probably shouldn't say that on this video. For me, 90%, again, having done this for so much of my life, the things that I'm teaching on this, on these videos are things that I either have experience with or other very successful gardeners have either told me or I've copied them or through just dumb luck. I have hit on something that, I have been successful with. My methods are super simple and super basic. I have in the past thought in the back of my mind one day I would write something down, but it would end up being, put a lot of different plants in the yard and keep the ground covered and enjoy it. It's not, I don't know. I think it's a lot of trial and error, talking to other gardeners, being observational. And I will say, if you want to learn about the individual plants outside of the videos that I do and others on YouTube, Wikipedia is an amazing resource for our business. Now, I wouldn't trust Wikipedia for, to learn about, Neil Young's history in the music business, because people are probably messing with it all the time. But for what I do and for what other horticulturalists and botanists do, the information on Wikipedia is amazing. I mean, really, really, really amazing. If you want to go down learning about a plant and a plant family, you can dive right in on Wikipedia and get a tremendous amount of out of that. And it is a resource that I use. But gardening book wise, again, if you for individual plants, Durr's Woody Plant Manual still. I still use it. That's a terrible answer, isn't it, for people asking? Because I should be prepared with my 10 favorite gardening books and list them down below so you can buy them on Amazon. I think you'll learn more getting out, doing, and listening to other gardeners, going to other gardening groups, listening to live talks, and getting out there and jumping in and asking lots of questions. You're lucky to be asking questions about something, that the people you're asking them are probably really nice people. I mean, gardeners tend to be folks that will share their knowledge and what they've learned. Okay, another bad answer from Jim. Mail order plant success. Somebody asked me if I'd have success with mail order plants. Well, I've gotten lots of plants from plantsbymail.com. A lot of the plants that are in this landscape came from them. I visited Mr. Maple up in the western part of the state. Plant Delights Nursery is right down the road from me here. It's one of the probably a very large perennial mail order nursery. Yeah, mail order nurseries are great. I think they're part of that. They tend to offer things that you can't necessarily find in your area, or more specialized or broader. You can find Japanese maples in your area, but Matt and Tim over the course of a year probably have 1,000 different named varieties come through their website. You're not going to find that in your local garden center. So I think mail order is a piece of of how I enjoy engaging in gardening. Make sure you read reviews, obviously, of the mail order companies that you're ordering from. That's always important with any online ordering, as we all know. But your local garden center, the box stores, and mail order. I mean, all of these things are part of it. You probably have, and you probably don't know this, you probably have a grower in your area that allows for some for folks to come in. I did that video down at Adcock's Nursery a couple weeks ago. Most people watching that video that are in my area probably had no idea that they could actually go in that nursery, but you can. So keep that in mind too. There's just a lot of different ways. But yes, mail order plants are, to me, a big part of my garden. When I'm talking about I want lots and lots of species, I can't necessarily do that in some of my local establishments. Okay. Somebody asked me about getting mockingbirds into the garden. And that's going to be berry-producing plants, so berry-producing hollies. So you could have native, anything from American hollies to, native deciduous hollies, inkberry hollies, what else? Mulberries, which I don't want a mulberry, but mulberries would probably work for this. What else? Wax myrtles, which are native shrubs. I know mockingbirds, eat the berries on wax myrtles as well. So berrying plants. There are a couple other bird-related questions on this. I do think birds are. I talked about that story last week about my, the sparrows taking care of a problem I had in my vegetable garden. Birds are an important part of gardening for sure. So berry-producing plants. Okay, somebody asked me about cutting their Carex back. You can cut your Carex hard, just like you do your Liriope in the late winter if you want to, if it's a bit tattered. I've got 3 Everillo Carex out here, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out if that's what I'm going to do or not this year. If they look tattered, I cut them. If they don't, those look so fresh, I'm probably going to leave them be. But if I had one that was a bit beat up and tattered, maybe about the 1st of March, you can cut it back hard. Somebody asked me about white fuzz on the bottom of their ligustrum. In all likelihood, that was scale. The white, you'll see near the base of a lot of plants, especially older woody plants. But ligustrum, in particular, down near the base, you'll get scale insects on them. We'd get them in the nursery too, on the trunks of the plants. The white fuzz that you're seeing now is actually the bodies as a fungus growing on what was the bodies of the insects before they molted. So you're not actually seeing the insect, you're seeing where the insect was. It'll be back next year. Again, I talk frequently about stressed plants being more vulnerable to these kinds of things. That might be a plant that I cut back hard, fertilize, make sure it's mulched around, make sure you're watering it occasionally when you need to water it. I can't believe I'm talking about this about ligustrum. I'd probably pull it out of the ground. But again, it's in some sort of stressed condition in all likelihood that's causing it to be vulnerable to those types of chewing insects. Okay. Somebody asked me if I direct sow my flowers and vegetables. Because of my time in the nursery business, and this probably frustrates some folks because I don't teach enough about direct sowing things. My time in the nursery business and me kind of being, everything's got to be just so. I do most of my seed starts in the house where I can get predictability. So if you're in the nursery business, and you're growing 1,000 of a block of 1,000 of something, you need that entire block to look the same. In order to get that result, you have to do steps that are the same each time, to achieve that result. Direct seeding, of flowers in the garden is a this, and for me, this doesn't work, necessarily, just for my mind. And so most of what I do is in the house. That's the reason for that. Doesn't mean it's the end all be all. It's just that's the reason I'm doing it, because I like predictability. The things I do from seed in the ground, there are a lot of easy things in the garden. So there's no reason to start okra in the house. There's no reason to start squashes or zucchini in the house. No reason to start melons in the house, peas, beans. I mean, all of those things germinate readily in the ground, and so those are the things I direct seed. You can direct seed zinnias and cosmos and a lot of your summer flowering annuals, but I don't. I do them in the house on trays under my light rack inside. I reuse the trays over and over and over again. It's got some upfront cost. The rack is $100 probably, and the lights. Each of those lights are, I don't remember at this point. Who knows now? Who knows now with inflation? But there's a little bit of upfront cost in that. But I really don't have any cost hardly going forward in it, other than a little bit of potting soil in the trays. But I reuse the trays over and over and over again, and I use fish emulsion as my fertilizer, and you can get a gallon of fish emulsion that'll last you 2 years. So, there's a little initial upfront cost, but then, really not hardly any cost going forward, and I have predictability. But again, a lot of those things could be direct seeded. Okay, somebody asked me if crepe myrtle suckers, they can just let their crepe myrtle suckers turn into trees. Crepe myrtles will sucker on the roots. Crepe myrtle suckers, the little new tree that's coming from the roots under the ground, should be clones of the parent tree. So in theory, they should grow into almost an exact duplicate of the parent tree. With crepe myrtles, I have noticed over the years that the suckers have a lot of powdery mildew on them. And I've never been able to figure out, was it, at first I thought, well, maybe it's the shade from the tree, that's, keeping the leaves a little more moist, and that's why they have powdery mildew on them. But then, the bottom leaves on the parent tree don't have powdery mildew, and they've all been bred to be powdery mildew resistant. There's something inferior about crepe myrtle root suckers. I have no idea what it is. You can certainly try to cut one away from the parent and move it to a new location and grow it out as a tree and just see. But there's something inferior about them. I don't understand why they don't seem to be actual clones of the parent plant. Maybe in the roots don't have all of the genetic material that's required to produce an actual clone of the parent. I have no idea. But they seem inferior to me, and they always look sickly. But it's certainly worth a try to see if it maybe, once it's moved away from the parent plant, if it looks more like it. I don't know. Somebody made a comment about learning from me that less is more. Their gardening approach being less is more, and they have a lot of different plants in their landscape. I hope so. I hope that's what people get from it. It's not to obsess about it. Let things tell you when they're dry. Don't overwater. Don't water because it's Tuesday. Water because something needs water. Hopefully, thank you very much for that comment. And hope that's what people get out of it. Somebody also came in with a comment about they had tomatoes with aphids last year, and the finches came and ate the aphids. They decided to do nothing, and then finches took care of the problem. And I had told that story about my brassicas and the sparrows last week. One other story, I sit out here and do consultations in the afternoon when I have consultations, and I can hear every leaf back here. I had a question, and I meant to answer it a few weeks ago about, do I have slugs because I have all these leaves in my garden beds. And I meant to answer this question, and somehow I skipped it. I can sit here and listen. There's not a leaf in this backyard that doesn't get flipped over every afternoon by robins. I can stand up from this spot, after doing a consultation, and 25 robins will take off in this back garden space. They literally come in here and flip over every leaf. And I've invited them in here. They have lots of things to eat, lots of things to do. But those robins will spend all afternoon just flipping every leaf over looking for things to eat. So no, I don't have slugs. definitely don't. They've done a pretty good job of cleaning through anything out there that would be damaging to my plants. They're probably eating beneficials too. They'll just eat anything. Okay. Somebody they're in Zone 7B want to know if they should plant a 1-gallon sunshine ligustrum and some liriope. You could probably plant the liriope upside down in a plastic sack, 4 feet underground, and not have a problem with it. That's a joke and an exaggeration, obviously, but you're not going to kill liriope in all likelihood. The 1-gallon sunshine ligustrum, one of the things I say in my monthly videos is be careful that it doesn't have new growth. So if it's been outside and it's acclimated to the temperatures, put it in the ground. It's better off in the ground than it is in the container. If you just bought it and it came out of a greenhouse and it's got 4 inches of new growth on it, that's not a plant I'm going to put in the ground. I'm going to protect that the rest of the winter and then put it in the ground. So just base it on that. If it's been outside and it's been acclimated, put it in the ground. Okay. Somebody wanted to know about a autumnalist cherry, which is a cherry tree that flowers from kind of late fall through the winter into early spring. Wanted to know if it was a good one for a planting bed in their landscape. Yeah, it's a tree. I mean, that one, gosh, that tree's got a bunch of common names. Higgins cherry, rosebud cherry. Great looking plant. It'll get 20, 25 feet tall. I've probably seen them. Maybe 25 feet wide. So if you've got room for an ornamental tree that's that big, that's fine. One thing I'll tell you guys, the tree in my landscape at the old house that was the most surprising about its root aggression was a cherry tree. And so cherries are amazing at just being, roots this big around, way out from the tree, way out from the drip line. Everybody talks about the main roots are under the drip line. That cherry had roots 15 feet outside of its drip line that were still, 2.5 inches around. So keep that in mind. It's an aggressive rooting plant. It's probably not going to allow a lot of play right underneath it. So if you're willing to if you have the size lot that you can have a 20-foot wide tree and you're not worried about that space being only that tree, then that's fine. If you had for me, I have such a small lot. Again, I know it's not small for some areas of the world, obviously, but if I put a tree out here that got 25 feet wide and I couldn't really plant under it because the roots were so aggressive, it would take out a lot of my landscape. So for me, it's probably not a good choice. But I would base it on the size of lot. Beautiful tree. And then somebody asked me about bird feeders. Do I have bird feeders? Yes, I do put bird feeders out here. My recommendation for buying bird feeders is go ahead and spend some money on them. If you start feeding birds and you buy a cheap little bird feeder, the squirrels are going to tear it up, and then you're going to buy another bird feeder, and then you're going to go through the steps of ending up buying a $100 bird feeder. What I'm saying is save yourself ultimately some money and just jump right in and bite the bullet and get a metal bird feeder that closes when the squirrels get on it, because they'll eat you out of house and home. Heck, they'll eat, they can eat enough food. You can pay the bird feeder back off and save money from the food. I do allow the squirrels to eat my suet. I have suet cakes hanging on the front porch in a little metal cage, and the squirrels will come up there. But I have that little metal cage up on the front porch because I get the most interesting birds. I get, more interesting birds come to the suets. And so I do have the suet feeder, and the squirrels can get to it. But save yourself some money ultimately and go buy a really good quality metal bird feeder. Go to a garden center that's close to you, bite the bullet, spend the money, and it'll be something that'll last a long time. And just the money again, the money saved from the food alone. I cut my food in half when you make that upgrade to a really good bird feeder that's squirrel proof, that's actually squirrel proof. Your bird food budget cuts in half. So anyway, thank you guys for following along with these videos. I hope it's not too echoey in this indoor space, and that the sleet isn't going to be too loud when I'm about to listen to this. Ask questions down below. Again, it might be 2 weeks before I'm back with one of these Q&A question and answers. Thanks for watching.